Let's analyze today's hearings with our legal experts. Joining me now, Wendy Patrick and Vinoo. Wendy is a legal analyst and former prosecutor. Vinoo is also an attorney and former prosecutor. Good to have you both with us. Wendy, did you hear anything today that, in your opinion, amounts to any kind of evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors?
Oh, well, Michelle, the reason that's such an interesting question, and I'm a current prosecutor, is this is not the type of thing that needs to be a crime. So that's one side of the argument. It's a political question, but even though it's a political question, there has to be enough to where the lawmakers can save face with their constituencies, where there has to be some credibility. And there wasn't anything either of these witnesses said that meets that burden. It was more fizzle than sizzle. That's the way I would describe the hearing today. It was interesting, but it wasn't the kind of interest that would rise to the level of what they need to actually move forward. Now, I understand they have the votes in the House, but this inquiry is dead on arrival in the Senate, and everyone has to think about that before they continue to investigate rather than legislate.
And Vinoo, one of the big points that Republicans have been making is that the testimony was mostly hearsay and opinions. It's about a call that he heard, about another call. Both of the Democrat star witnesses confirmed that, for one, they weren't on the call between President Trump and President Zelensky. And this other call that we heard about today that apparently happened again, they heard about it from somebody who told them about it. So it's a game of telephone. And this is something, or broken telephone perhaps, and this is something that Representative Jim Jordan was hitting on today. Let's watch.
So you weren't on the call, were you? You didn't listen on President Trump's call and President Zelensky's call?
I did not.
You've never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney?
I never did.
You never met the president?
That's correct.
You had 3 meetings again with Zelensky and it didn't come up.
And 2 of those they had never heard about, as far as I know.
And
there was no reason for it.
President Zelensky never made an announcement. This is what I can't believe. And you're their star witness. You're their first witness.
Mr.
You're
Jordan,
the guy. You're the guy based on this. Based on, I mean, I've seen church prayer chains that are easier to understand.
Wendy's pointed, granted, this isn't a court of law. This is a court of public opinion, and that's a point that the Republicans have been making, that this is more about political theater. But nonetheless, does it weaken the case that is mostly, if not completely, just hearsay and opinion here?
Not at all, because remember, these hearings are going to go on for a while and more witnesses are going to come forward. All of this, whether this is hearsay or not, is at this point irrelevant. It's what they've heard, what they're aware of, and what they've reported. They have now reported things that constitute high crimes and misdemeanors.
They've reported that they've heard about things.
Yes,
there's no
enough.
direct source.
That's enough.
That's hearsay.
That's enough.
That's hearsay.
This isn't a trial.
Well,
No,
exactly. So we agree that by legal standards we'd have a problem.
No, but this isn't a trial. It's never meant to be. So when you talk about what they've heard, what they're speaking about, these are 2 very highly respectable people, as your correspondent said. The president has clearly violated the Emoluments Clause. Congress is doing its job to critique him, to investigate. This isn't a trial. This is an investigation. That's what it's supposed to do.
So, okay, it's an investigation, which, as I say, Republicans say is all for show because it doesn't really hold up to legal standards. Wendy, the Democrats' entire case was that the president was using aid to coerce President Zelensky. The Ukrainian president has repeatedly said that he felt very comfortable with the phone call. He's made that comment to media around the world that he didn't feel any pressure of any kind, saying it again and again. He also has said that he had no knowledge of military aid being withheld, meaning no quid pro quo. And Ambassador Taylor today admitted that he talked to Zelensky the day after the call with the president, and that Zelensky himself said to him he felt no pressure. Let's watch.
You were with President Zelensky the very next day?
we were. We had a meeting with him the very next day.
And did President Zelensky raise any concerns about his views of the call?
He said, Ambassador Volker, Ambassador Sondland were in his office, and we asked him, I think, how the call, he said, call was fine.
All right, Wendy, I understand this is not a court of law, but does this negate the entire argument that yet again we have confirmation that President Zelensky, the subject of the quid pro quo, which didn't happen, said he felt the call was fine?
That's right. That is so important, Michelle. And while it's true we don't have any kind of a legal definition of a high crime or misdemeanor, it's also true that we have to look at the two parties that actually were on the call instead of all this objectionable hearsay of people that weren't on the call, of what they might have heard, second level, third level. You know, we keep talking about this fancy Latin term, quid pro quo. Let me give you another Latin term, mens rea. Mental state. In order to prove that this was a this for that kind of phone call, we would have to prove mental state. And that's part of the problem that Democrats have. And I think there's really sort of bipartisan understanding that that actually is something that we do need to prove if, in fact, this is going to hold water.
And I also want to say, apply here.
Those witnesses were great.
Point. No one has to prove quid pro quo
Let's give you the last word. We're out of time. But Vinoo, wrap up your argument. We'll give you 30 seconds to make it.
Here you have, imagine if this was anyone else. You're asking the president to be held to a lower standard than anyone else. This is the leader of our country actually saying, you know, investigate a political opponent. This is what Ben Franklin would have called obnoxious, and why, when impeachment is a measure to remove an obnoxious executive.
But the facts remain that the aid was not withheld, that President Zelensky did not know about the aid potentially being withheld during the phone call.
That's after the fact spinning. And John Bolton resigned during all of this, right?
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I'm sure we will continue this conversation the weeks ahead. Thank you so much, Wendy Patrick and Vinoo Verghese. Appreciate it, as always.
Appreciate it.